Chapter 2 21 Days Until Christmas. There were still a few last stars shining in the inky blue sky when Max staggered out of his unfamiliar bed in the unfamiliar apartment that smelled like old boiled cauliflower. He groped his way down the dark hallway into the living room, crammed with furniture, its wallpaper ripped and its ceiling crisscrossed with water stains. Max hated the rundown apartment that his family had been forced to move into after an electrical fire destroyed their home while they were off at school and work 4 weeks ago. All of them did. But as his dad kept pointing out, in the middle of a bitter Pine River winter, they were lucky to have a roof over their heads. The town had rallied around them, starting up collections and fund drives to help them move and to provide the family with the essentials: clothes and blankets and some toys for Max's little sister, Fiona. But what no one outside his family knew was that the expense of building or buying a new home was out of the Callahan family's price range, plain and simple, which was why Max had been waking up well before the sun each day to check and see if the angel tree was up. He figured you had to get your wish up early if that wish was big. And the request for a house was about as big as it got. Max peered sleepily through the window at the town square. In the dim splashes of light cast by the streetlights, he saw something that sent a current through his whole body, jolting him wide awake. The angel tree! For a moment Max just looked out at the tree, its branches swaying in the pre-dawn wind. Then he ran to get dressed and grabbed the wish he had prepared 2 days after the fire. The frigid air stung his face as he headed out of the building and made his way to the square, but Max barely noticed. By the afternoon, there would be over 100 paths crisscrossing through the snow to the tree, but his was the first, his footsteps silent in the powdery snow covering the square. As he came closer to the tree, the zesty smell of pine mixed with the scent of doughnuts baking at Cinnamon Bakery across the way. Max's hands were shaking from the cold as he carefully tied his wish, the very first wish, to a springy branch. He knew his wish was much too big. He was acting like little Fiona, who still believed in Santa Claus. But he fastened the wish to the tree anyway, letting go of the branch and hoping against hope that somehow, maybe, it might just come true. 45 minutes later, Max was headed out again, this time to school. As he passed the tree, he saw that a few more tiny scraps of white paper had joined his against all that green. "Hey, Max!" He was pulled from his thoughts by his neighbor, Lana Levkov, who had come out of Cinnamon's with a big paper bag. Growing up, Max had always liked Lana, who could throw a football harder than most boys and always made the big kids let Max play, even when they said he was too young. She'd left Pine River for college, but he had moved back recently to take care of her mother, who had had a stroke. Lana was wearing a thick red wool coat, and Max noticed a scrap of white paper in her hand. "Hi," Max said. "Headed to the angel tree?" Lana nodded. "It's a wish for my mom, actually," she said. "She keeps talking about these Russian pastries she had when she was a girl. I can't make toast, let alone some complicated cream thing, whose name my mom can't remember. But I figure someone in town will be able to figure it out and help us." "Yeah," Max agreed. "I bet you're right." He'd never heard of a wish not coming true once it was hung on the tree, though the wish he had put up that morning might be the first. "I remember coming here when I was a girl," Lana said wistfully as she gazed at the tree. "Back then all I needed were simple things, like horseback riding lessons, and happiness was mine." She turned to Max. "I bet all you want is a new football and you'll be totally happy, right?" Max did not know how to respond to such a dumb remark, so he just nodded, then headed toward Brewster Street. There was nothing simple about Max's life. Not the wish he had hung on the tree that morning, not the place he was headed now. But even so, Max knew things were better now than they had been. Back in second grade, they had been the worst. That was when every other kid in his class had learned to read, but Max could barely sound out the word cat. That was when he had become the class clown. Any time a teacher called on him, or he needed to share his work, Max pulled a prank instead. And while his school skills stayed awful, he became extremely good at pranks. Midway through the year, he was tested for learning disabilities. His stomach twisted up when he thought of that awful test, of how the clock had ticked on for an eternity, but it still hadn't been enough time for him to get through all the problems. Still, after that, he had finally gotten the help he needed, and slowly got back on track, though not fast enough. He had to repeat second grade, the most humiliating thing imaginable. If it weren't for his best friend, Cammy, giving the evil eye to anyone who even looked like they might tease him, Max might have become the first second grade dropout in the history of Pine River Elementary School. Instead, he stepped up the pranks, earning a reputation that bordered on being legendary. "Max, what's up?" his friend Alex shouted. Max turned around and felt the shocking cold of a snowball hit him smack in the face. Chunks of ice slid down his cheeks, and he rubbed his eyes quickly to clear them. Alec, Danny, and Lucas, friends from the flag football team, were half a block behind him, hooting with laughter. "You're dead!" Max shouted, scooping up a handful of snow and lunging toward them. "It's on!" Lucas yelled, mashing a pile of snow into a tight ball as he ran across the street. Max ducked behind a tree as Danny sent another snowball flying. Then he charged. They were a block from school now, and the kids walking toward the big brick building either ran to get out of the way or began digging into the snow for their own artillery. Soon the area was a mass of flying snow, the air alive with screams, and then the inevitable whistle as the vice principal broke up the battle and herded everyone into the building. Max was wet and his heart was pumping, but he was grinning as he headed up the steps with his friends. A snowball fight was definitely a good start to the day. "You throw like a wimp," Alex said cheerfully as he walked into the heated hallways of the Pine River Middle School. Speckled gray rugs had been set out over the floors to absorb the slush, tracked in, and the faded cream-colored walls were papered with posters for various clubs, meetings, and games. "At least I don't throw like your mama," Max replied. Though it wasn't one of his strongest comebacks, Alex snickered and high-fived Max. Your mama jokes were a favorite form of communication for the team. The warning bell rang and Max headed for his locker, greeting people as he went. As he walked past Joe Thompson's locker, Max could see Joe glaring at him. Joe had been new at the start of the year, a pale, skinny kid with shaggy brown hair who walked with his head down. On the second day of school, Max had stopped by Joe's locker to ask him if he'd want to join the flag football team. Joe hadn't seemed too into the idea, but Max had figured he was probably shy. When Max had made a few jokes trying to loosen him up, Joe had hauled off and punched him. Max had been so shocked he hadn't even thought to punch Joe back. He had just stood there, blood dripping from his nose, the gasps of his classmates in his ears as the new kid stalked off. Of course he hadn't told any of the teachers who asked about his bloody face what had happened. Max was not a snitch, but he did regret that he had just stood there, not even giving Joe a shove before he walked away. In the end, though, Joe's obnoxious attitude and the fact that he had punched Max for no reason had combined to make him the most hated kid at Pine River. Not that he even seemed to notice. He kept to himself, ignoring everyone. The only time he ever reacted was when Max passed. Then he acted like Max was some kind of monster. "Hey, Max, I'm desperate," said Tom, another friend from the flag football team, as he pushed through the crowded hall and threw an arm across Max's shoulders. You're my only hope. Obi-Wan." Max always appreciated a reference to Star Wars. "What's up?" he asked. "Miss Ruffish is giving us a quiz, and I didn't even have time to study," Tom said as he turned the corner and arrived at Max's locker. "If I flunk it, my parents will ground me, and then I'll miss the game on Sunday." Every Sunday there was a pickup ice hockey game on the river that neither Max nor Tom ever missed. "You've got to do something to stop that quiz." Tom needed a prank pulled off, of course. That was the kind of help people came to Max for, the one thing he was known for, which used to make Max puff with pride, but somehow lately was making him feel trapped in a box, the edges pressing tight against him. "You've come to the right place, young Jetty," he said, shrugging it off. "I'm on it." "Excellent," Tom said, slapping him on the back and heading down the hall. Max watched him for a moment, then began shoving stuff in his locker as the bell rang. He slammed the metal door shut with a clank and jogged down the hall, his thoughts drifting back to the quiet dark of the morning and the wish that he knew could never come true.